Hello and welcome to the Crafting Shares. I'm Ruth from Beltane Gifts and today we're going to be making one of these, which is a little gnome. And this is a very simple gnome. It's just using I think 4 different colours of fibre. Haven't even added eyes to this one. If you wanted to you could though, very easily. It's one of those things that you could adapt and add to and just basically make it your own. For today's project you're going to need a felting pad to work on. This is a cloth bag filled with rice. A felting needle. This is just a fine generic one, so this is one of the smaller ones that I've got. Got my finger protectors because I'm going to be holding my work as I go along. I'm also using a felted dome for this. Now there's a link in the description that just shows you how to make your own felted dome. Definitely a good one to have because a lot of my projects at the moment are using these as their base. I've got some, I think this is natural carded corriedale roving, but don't quote me on that. There's some eggshell corriedale roving here, which is going to be the nose, and then I've got some carded corriedale fibre, which is going to be for the hat. Okay, to start with then we're going to need our dome, our needle, finger protectors, our cushion, and our blue fibre because we're going to start off by making his hat. Now for this, because it's the carded fibre and it uses very short fibres, you don't need to tear it apart and mess it up before you start. If you were going to do this with some roving, which you definitely can do, what I'd recommend is just taking your roving and pulling it apart and making it as messy as possible to start off with and create kind of like a ball before you start. But with this, what we can do is we can actually just wind it on. So I've taken my length of roving and just a little bit up from the top, I'm just going to lay it over and just stab down. I'm not stabbing right to the edge here because I want a little bit of loose to play with later. So just about ½ centimetre in, I'm just going to start stabbing round in a line, just attaching the fibre. And I'm using quite deep jabs at about a 90-degree angle to the dome. And what we're doing is we're just tacking the fibre in place really. Now once we get back to where we started, I'm just going to start winding my way up a little bit. What I'm doing is I'm just kind of wrapping the fibre around just to create a nice big wadge of it just at the top here. Now I'm stabbing just slightly up of that first line we did, and I'm going to be working my way up in a spiral, just catching a bit more fibre each time I go round. Now once you get past the dome itself, you're not attaching it to anything, it's just stabbing into itself. So what I'm going to do is just grab the whole squadge of it and I'm just giving it a little bit of a twist just to firm it up a little bit, and then I'm pushing down with my finger, so there's still lots of squish to this, it's going to be easier to shape, but the fibres are that bit closer together so that with my fine needle I'm still connecting with them all, so you can hear it as I stab. Got a nice crunchy stab there, which means that you're catching lots of fibres at once. Okay, so at the minute we've got almost a cylinder of fibre here. And what I want to do is bring it out into a point. So now it's attached, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a pull and just lengthen it slightly. What this means is there's going to be a lesser amount of fibre towards the point. So when I start stabbing it together, I should be able to get a nice point to it. So to start forming that, I'm just going to pinch between finger and thumb just lightly. And what this does is it just brings those fibres closer together and makes them easier to stab. There we go, and that's starting off that point. And I'm just going to work my way around it. Now you don't have to start with the point, I just felt like it today, so I'm going to have a go at making it and then just do my diagonal from the point down to the body. If you wanted to though, you can work your way up to the point and keep adding fibre too if you wanted a really high hat. Now you can see I'm starting to form that point there at the end, and the way I'm doing it is I'm keeping my fingers loosely pinched around the fibre and my needle is stabbing at a 90-degree angle to the plane I want to create. So in this case I want to form that diagonal, so from the brim of the hat to the point. So I'm stabbing at a 90-degree angle to that diagonal, and that helps form that shape that I'm after. It takes a little bit of practice, but once you can visualize this, you can pretty much make any shape. And what I'm doing is just rotating the whole thing as I go, keeping that same angle with the needle, and this gives us a nice cone shape. Now try not to over stab at this point. I'm not stabbing too closely together, they're quite random stabs, but I'm just bringing the whole thing in gradually. this just gives us a bit more control over the finished shape. Okay, so this is starting to give us a nice tall hat with a bit of a point. Now I quite like it if they have a bit of a droopy point there at the back. Now the best way to do this is, once you've got it at the shape you want, and to do that I tend to use my finger just to hold it in place, just stab at the back part of the hat, just little jabs close together. And what this does is it catches those fibres and it tightens them up, and the more they tighten, the more the point of the hat will curve backwards. Be sure to rotate it and stab from the other side as well. There we go, and then when we let go you can see that there's a nice curve there on the hat. Now what I'm going to do is go over the whole thing and just bring it in and down a little bit. I'm still leaving this section here by the head loose, and that's because what I want to do is create a real indication that the hat is separate from the body. So we're going to play with that in a minute, but let me just go over the whole thing. What I'm going to do is just jab over it all, just with little stabs there close together. And what this will do is it'll bring it in slightly, but it'll also smooth the whole thing out. Probably going to take about 10 minutes, so I shall see you soon. Okay, so that's done, and you can see it's much smoother now and a bit smaller, and we've got our little flap there of fibre left. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to tuck it under itself, or roll it under, and to do that I'm just going to catch the edge with just the point of my needle and tuck it up and under, so I'm not stabbing until just underneath where the blue joins the brown. So just catch it and roll it, work your way around the whole thing doing this. And if you use the side of the needle when you're catching your fibre, then you can just catch a lot more at once. Just don't put any sideways pressure on the needle if you can. We don't want to bend it or break it. Now go around a couple of times, just try and get the line as straight as you can. Mine's tipping forward towards the front, but I'm okay with that. I think that's quite nice to have kind of like a tipped brim almost, but I'm going to make the curve a bit more even if I can. Okay, so once that's done, we're just going to stab over the whole thing. And again, I don't want to stab straight down into the brown. I want to leave that definition, so I'm just stabbing upwards slightly towards the blue. And I'm not going right to the edge at this point. I just want to get rid of some of this puffiness from the loose fibre. What we can do then is just stab straight down where we've got that loose fibre, just to kind of, I don't know, blend it in. We want to make it look as though the hat's all one piece. Okay, that's a lot more smooth now. So what I'm going to be doing is stabbing straight up against the blue section, just to create just a little bit more definition and smooth off this line as well. So I'm not catching any of the brown fibre as I do this, just catching the very edge of the blue and just tucking it up a little bit further, almost flattening it out just to create that rim of the hat. There we go. Now I want mine to show up even more. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be reducing the size of the brown dome by stabbing straight down, using quite deep stabs but close together. And can you see how that's created an indent there? So I'm going to go just around the top section. I don't need to go down too far. I just want to make the difference between the dome and the hat really stand out. And then I'm going to go over and just smooth it out, just so that there's just a nice curve where that line currently is. It's going to take me a few minutes. I'll be right back. There we go. So we've finished our stabbing. So the hat's really standing out now, which is great. So what we want to do next is to add our nose. For the nose, I've got some of this eggshell coloured corriedale roving. Because it's roving, I'm going to have to tear it apart a bit. I don't think I need quite so much, so I'm going to put a bit to the side. Less is always better in this case, just because you can always add more later, but it's a nightmare trying to take any off. So I'm just going to separate it out and just mess it up. Now if you do have some carded fibre instead that you'd prefer to use, definitely go for that. This is just what I'd got to hand, so I'm just going to give it a bit of a rub between my hands there just to start it into that ball shape. Go. This also just catches any of those loose fibres and tucks them all in together, so we don't have too many wispy bits coming off. Now I'm just going to find where the point of the hat goes down, so that should be, I think, our centre there. I'm going to lay the fibre just over where I want it, just a couple of stabs right in the centre just to hold it in place. Once it's held there, what you can do is start working around the outside, and I'm doing this at a 45-degree angle and just stabbing in, catching the fibre, and I want to work my way around in a circle, and the size of your nose depends on the size of the circle that you create. So if you want a big nose, do quite a big circle, small nose, small circle, and just be careful when you come round by the hat. We don't want to stab into the blue. We only want to stab our fibre down into the brown. So you might need to just stab down at a 90-degree angle rather than a 45-degree angle here. So just stab straight down into the part where the two meet, and then just continue your way round in a circle. And what you want to do is just to keep going round and round until this fibre starts getting tucked in and creates that dome that we're after. So if you need to, you might just want to catch the fibres just a little bit higher up each time you go round. And you'll probably find it's a lot easier to move your little gnome than it is to stab from a different angle. This way you've always got your needle at the same angle. It just gives you a bit of an easier felting experience. So starting to get just a little divot where I anchored it originally, I'm just going to pinch it with finger and thumb, just wiggle it about a bit just to loosen those fibres. So we want everything to stretch out over there, and we don't want that divot showing. And then just continue going round. Okay, I'm just going to take a moment, have a look at it from a few different angles, just give it a little squish just to see where the loosest fibres are and where I need to aim. So looking from an angle here, I can see that I've got some little lumpy sections just where I've attached the nose to the brown. So I'm just going to aim for any bits that stick out more than others. And top of my nose is a little bit skew with, there's a little bit of extra fibre just there. So what I'm going to do is just catch it from the side and just stab it down. And as this tightens, as I stab it in, it should just release some of that bull cut top and just smooth everything out a bit more. Go. Again, give it just a little pinch, move things about, but I think that should do now for our nose. If you were going to add eyes, what I'd recommend is adding them just here where the nose and the hat meet, and you can just attach your thread just under the blue section at the back to hide it, and then sew through and attach your eyes. I'm not going to add eyes to this one though, I'm going to have them without, but I am going to add some facial hair. For this we're going to need the natural grey roving, which is here, down the needle. I would definitely recommend using roving rather than carded fibre for this, just because the roving, with it you get the natural length. If I just pinch and pull, you'll see this is the natural length of the fibre, whereas with the carded fibre you'll find the natural length's about so long and it's much too short for this. If you added it on, you'll find the bits would fall off, whereas with this we can really anchor it into place with a few stabs. And it just should stay there, hopefully. We're going to attach it the same way we would fur. So start with the beard. I'm going to take my piece of natural fibre. I'm going to lay it over so that the midpoint is just under the nose. I'm going to put my finger just to hold it in place against the body. You need to leave it loose. Don't pinch it. If you do, you'll find it's really tricky to kind of tack it into place. If you just lay your finger over it just to hold it there. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put the side of the needle against the fibre and then just stab down right underneath the nose. And I'm using just a gentle soaring motion. And what this does is it just catches that fibre and it tucks it into place. And if I just show you there, you can see it's starting to fold up, and that's because this loose fibre here is getting tucked into where I've stabbed. Now I'm going to turn him round just because I find it easier to work from left to right, and I'm just going to bring this fibre just back where I want it. This time I'm just going to hold it against his nose a little bit, and you can see the fibre's getting shorter as I stab, and that's just because it's getting tucked in. Go. And you should, once it's been put in place, be able to actually hold him up and swing him about a bit by his beard. I think I quite like a bushier beard, so I'm just going to do exactly the same again. Pull off just a section of the natural length. Go. Make sure it's about even, and what I'm going to do is just quickly just fold that back open so we've got the full length of the previous section. I'm going to lay this over the top and then just do exactly the same again. So working from one side with a soaring motion and then working back from the other side, and I'm going to keep going just until I can feel it or see it getting sucked in as I stab, just because I want it to be nice and firm there. Okay, so once that's secured, we're just going to fold down the top part really gently with the needle. I mean, really, you shouldn't use your needle for this. I am, but you shouldn't. I'm just going to comb it out slightly. If you've got an awl metal spike or a wooden spike, something that you can just use to comb through the fibre, that would be great too. So I'm just getting the fibre just spread out and where we want it, and then I'm just going to go over again, just a few little stabs just under the nose, just to make sure it's doubly attached and it's going to stay laying this way. There we go. So there's our little beard, and we want our little moustache, which will define his mouth as well. So again, just grab your fibre, pull off a section. I'll go a little bit thicker than that. And what we're going to do is we're going to lay it so that the middle this time is just under the nose. And this time I'm going to be just gently holding it in place. I'm not putting any pressure on it, it's just to stop it moving. And I'm just going to tuck one edge just up under the nose, roll it down a little bit, do exactly the same. And I'm just going to keep going, sorry about having to move it, just a little bit at a time, stabbing it from either side, just until it starts to just stick in place and I can catch all those fibres. Once it's starting to go, can just stab up towards the nose. We don't want to stab into the nose itself, just underneath it, but we want this little join where it is attached to be quite small if we can make it. And again, keep stabbing until it starts to bend in on itself and fold, and that's just your way of seeing that the fibres all getting sucked into where you're stabbing. Just between finger and thumb, I'm just going to twist the ends of his moustache and start felting the whole thing into just one section, and the same on the other side. And then once you've got the shape you want, you can just trim off any loose bits then. But I like to see sort of how it's looking before I start cutting. And I'm going to do the same with the beard. We like a nice point to our beard. There you go, so there's our moustache and beard added. Now if you want to, you can trim these, and I think I will actually, so I'm just going to trim them a little bit more and just cut them off just to make them a bit shorter. I know we have just done a lot of twisting on those, we're just going to twist them again. Go. And I think, yeah, we might trim his beard a little bit too. For the beard, I'm going to do it at a bit of an angle. There we go. Just give it a little bit of a point, and again, just a little twist with finger and thumb. And there we go, there is our little gnome. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to click on that subscribe button and the bell icon so that you don't miss out on future videos. Next time we're going to be making one of these, and I will see you next time. Stay safe.